Okay, if Jesus Jesus's disciples were just that, right? They were disciples, followers of Christ. The word disciple literally means one who is taught, one who is taught. Um, and that's the Christian life. It's a life of formation, it's a life of education. Maybe not just like, I'm not thinking strictly school setting, but it is a formative life where we are changed. And so parents are key in the formation of their children, just as Pope Benedict said. And so if we're going to be effective in these little churches, we have to begin to think like educators. So that's what I want us to do here in a moment. Just as Christ took the formlessness of creation and the chaos and the disorder of creation, and over the course of 6 days, he works that creation into something beautiful and good. He is doing a similar work in the disorder and chaos and formlessness of our children's souls. And he has placed you parents as key instruments in that work. And so what I'd like for us to do now is look at 7 educational questions. If a good educator um, considers these, maybe not exactly in this way, but these sort of questions are in the mind of a good educator. First question, why? Why teach? Why in the world would you teach? That's the most foundational question, and oftentimes it's a neglected question. You, I recently read C.S. Lewis's *Abolition of Man*. It's a book on education, and it's a kind of it's one of his more difficult reads and short. But he says, throughout human history, the purpose of education has been to align the student with the grain of the universe, align the student with nature. That's been the purpose of education. Whether you're in Eastern countries, African countries, European, throughout history, that's the purpose. Try to get the person to live in sync, in harmony with nature. He says now, in the modern world, for the first time ever, the purpose of education has been to teach the student how to control and manipulate nature for their own purposes. He says what we do all too often in schools is deconstruct, break down, um, and break down everything. It causes students to question everything. Um, we wonder why our 12-year-olds are so cynical, right? It's because the education is completely shifted in what it's doing. Here's a great quote that Lewis says. He says, what teachers are doing, he says, we're cutting down jungles. We're cutting down jungles when we need to be irrigating deserts. We're taking all that is good and we're just, with a bulldozer, just pushing it down when our students are starving and thirsty. They're like a desert. We need to irrigate that. We need to nurture them. And of course, that's what he says Christian education is all about. It's about nurture. So the why question, it's an important question. The what question, what is the content that we should be teaching? Churches are notorious for having not really a plan here. Somebody says, I like that Andy Griffith show. I want to do an Andy Griffith Bible study. You got it. Women of the Bible and Financial Peace University, and not not all of those are bad classes. Some of them. Not all of those are bad classes, but there's no overarching plan. The what question is what's kind of the plan? What's the curricular plan? Like, what are we trying to do? And it's important that churches and that parents as well ask that. Like, what's the plan? Next question, the whom question. Whom? Who do we teach? Whom do we teach? Is the better way to put it. Whom do we teach? What are these people? Are they just little like are they brains on a stick that just receive information and that's like who they are as students? No, they're people, right? So that's the question that the whom question deals with. Number 4, where? Where should Christian education or where should any education take place? When I was growing up, education, uh, CE as we called it, took place in the CE wing, Christian education wing. It's a series of like Sunday school classes. In the last 20 years or so, and I think for good reason, the setting for much of Christian education has moved to homes. I think that's reflected here at Sacred City and a lot of churches. And there's good reasons for that shift. But the where question deals with where it's best to educate. What's the setting? The when question. When do we teach certain groups the faith? It's a developmental question. So I work in a classical Christian school, and this developmental question is big for us. Dorothy Sayers um, has kind of provided a framework that our kind of schools follow. And basically what we say is when students are in the elementary ages, they're really good at memorizing lots of information. That's called the grammar stage. And if you're like me from third grade, you have all kinds of data memorized, like commercial jingles, friends' phone numbers, addresses. You can't do that anymore. Well, so um, the our school, the school I'm a part of, and like schools like Morningstar have said, well, why don't we emphasize uh, information? Like give them information through song and through chant. Do it in an engaging, humane way, not just rotely, but teach them all of this information, the grammar of every subject. And then when students move into the middle school years, they start to argue and bicker and nitpick and challenge and but. Rather than suppressing that, let's harness it. Let's teach them how to argue well and to think and to ask the why kind of question. Let's teach them logic. And so that's what we do. And then as they get into high school, it's all about expression and like whether. And typically for high school, it's reduced to like, am I wearing the right clothes? Do I drive the right car? Do I listen to the right music? Well, the goal of our types of school is to teach them how to express themselves well through their oral and written communication. Teach them how to write. That's what they want to do. So this is all the when question, right? Developmental. Like when do you teach what to the students? When do you teach your student about sex, for example? 4 or 5. Begin the discussion, I think. But there's times for introducing these things. That's the when question. How question. How do we teach people in a way that hits their head, heart, and hands? And much of what we do will be talking about that question. So I'm not going to really go into it much. And then finally, the who question. Who is to serve as teacher? Like what are the characteristics of a teacher? If we are going to be leading our children in the home, what should we be cultivating in ourselves? That's the who question. Deuteronomy chapter 6. If you ask a Christian what the most popular or most famous or even their favorite verse, they're probably going to say John 3:16. Famous verse, well-known verse. If you ask a Hebrew person in Old Testament times, or maybe even currently a Jewish person, what their favorite verse is, what the most important verse is, they're probably going to land on Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. The Shema. It means hear, O Israel. And this verse is within this text that we're going to talk about this morning. It's a very important text, and it really provides the basis for this concept of little church. So what we're going to do is break up into those groups and ask these 7 questions of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 1 through 9.